All right, getting back up and running. This is that first 63 AC30. And I've got the Vibe Trem channel 99.9% healthy. There's a little bit of DC leaking on the input of it, about 20 millivolts. And it may be the 68Ks hanging off the input jack. I'll play around with finding that. All the other woes that I had are gone. And the biggest woe I had is that the Vibe circuit was really wimpy sounding. The Trem was fine because I'll just do an abbreviated explanation until I get a chance to do the video on how the entire Vibe Trem works. The tremolo section does not use any real phase relations. So it's very easy to get that working because you don't have anything that's critical. There's nothing, there's no phase in relation to something else. It's what we perceive as just absolute phase because we don't have a reference. Once you go to the Trem, though, you have to have a lot of balance in the circuit for all the phase relationships to affect each other. Otherwise, one side dominates the other, and we're back to pretty much having Trem, where one does not cancel out the other even partially, because one is just stronger than the other. And so to get that resolved, I had to go through here. And again, this is not going to be the full thing. There's a first gain stage, which then goes to essentially a cathode ion phase inverter. Positive, negative version of the same waveform coming off that. You have to have equal strength there. And then there's a very critical phase shift set by an RC network on the cathode. And you have to have that very precise. And one of the 500 picofarad caps actually measured about 200 picofarad. So that was setting the phase in the wrong place for this to work. Then that's done twice in the circuit, one which has more high end and less lows, and the other which has less high end and has more lows. And those are fed to two different sides of a mixing stage. And the LFO circuit is also fed to essentially a cathode ion phase inverter, which gives a positive and negative version of that waveform. And those are applied to the two signals which have a 90-degree phase relationship to each other. And when you're in Vibe mode, then you have something which is partially out of phase with the other, and one of them's on when the other one's off, and vice versa, and that alternates real fast. And you have to have all the things balanced for that to work. So the other critical part of that I had to do was each input stage of the mixing tube, it's two triodes used to mix together through the plate, you have to have the same resistance on the grids, and they basically work as mixed resistors with the LFO pulse. And those were way out of whack, and now they're very balanced and matched to within a percentage of each other. And now we have a nice chewy vibrato. And you'll hear that better when we do the real mic video. But the owner also asked that this be slowed down even more than it was in the previous video. So I've got a tempt in orange drop here. So instead of 10-10, I've got 20-20 here. I didn't want to take out the old cap, so I'm putting new ones in parallel. And I did a a little thing on how the ground sequence going through the variable resistor, the pot, is a little bit different now, just to give better fine control. And I've got it about as slow as it can go because at some point in vibrato, as you turn the speed down all the way, the depth gets a little less apparent versus for our ears to perceive that phase thing in this mono circuit, compared to, say, a stereo magnetone where you've got left-right information as well, you have to have faster speeds, and this thing is capable of it at slowest. And again, at the very highest speed, it kind of falls apart a little bit. Not too bad, just not as thick and chewy there. So that maxes out at just over about 4 o'clock. From about 3 o'clock to 8 or 9 o'clock, there's a nice thick, chewy range for the vibrato. To the Trem, which turns off one half of the signal going to the mix stage. So instead of having two signals mixed together that are 90 degrees out of phase, one being turned on and off at different times, you just have one signal being turned on and off, and so you have an apparently slower speed. And that can handle the absolute minimum this circuit is set up to do. And that can handle the absolute max. With all that nice stuff in the middle. Now, for complex reasons we won't get into, that's about as slow as this circuit will do because there's only so much signal strength in that LFO without radically changing it away from how Vox initially did it. I don't want to redesign this totally. I want to stay within the parameters that they set forth, and I'm not making changes to a vintage amp willy-nilly. In this one case, the owner of this 63 owns another 63, which I'm also restoring, and that one's going to be kept exactly stock. So he will have one that's exactly what JMI made, and one that's a little bit more flexible. So I'm very pleased with that, and I'm going to replace this orange drop with another very small MLC like I have underneath this one, because it's little multi-layered ceramics, 1,000 volts, nothing will ever go wrong with it, and it just tucks beneath the old one very nicely. There's a bit of a pop on the Vibe Trem switch. I'm going to put a 10 meg resistor across that switch and get rid of that. And I'll probably do that to the JMI as well, just because it's nice and doesn't really change anything about the vintage performance. It just takes away a source of popping. So that's where I'm at on this. Next, I need to track down that on the guitar volume pot caused by about 20 millivolts being present at the input. And just about everything on that first triode stage, except for the coupling cap, has been changed out already. I know it's not the coupling cap. So I believe it's going to either be a heater wiring issue or the old 68K grid stoppers mounted at the jack.